Hi friends, today we are going to add on to our knowledge about multiplication. Before we jump into that, I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about something you learned in second grade. So in second grade, you talked about addition, and we know that the addition uses the plus sign. So we know that if we add 4 plus 3, we get the answer 7, or the sum of 7. So if I put 4 and 3 together, I get 7. We also learned in second grade that the opposite, or another new word would be called inverse, of addition is called subtraction. So if I wanted to undo this problem, so if I had 4, I added 3 more, and then I had 7, and I wanted to undo that, that would look like this. So in subtraction, where I'm taking away or using the minus sign, I would take that number, 7, my sum, and I could take away, subtract 3, and that would equal 4. So we can see a relationship between 4 plus 3 equals 7, and 7 minus 3 equals 4. You might even remember something called a fact family, where you would write both of these equations. Another example would be if we take 6 plus 2 more, and we get the total or sum of 8. The opposite, or the inverse of that equation, would be 8 minus 2 equals 6. So we can see that we're still using the same 3 numbers in both of our equations, but they're in a different order. So we're going to take this idea today, and we are going to apply it to multiplication. So now we're going to take that idea that we just learned about addition and subtraction being related, and we're going to apply that to multiplication and its partner. So the opposite, or the inverse of multiply, which means when we're multiplying, we're combining things equally. So if we have 3 times 5, we know those are our 2 factors. If we multiply those, if we combine them equally, we get the product 15. So the opposite, or the inverse that undoes that, is called division. So we have the verb multiply and we have the verb divide. So if multiply means to combine equally, the opposite of that is to share or divide equally. So we're breaking things apart instead of putting things together. So before we start to talk about our strategies, we need to learn a few new vocabulary words. So this big number that we start with, so right now we're looking just like in addition and subtraction. We have our product. Now in our division problem, the big number becomes the first number. So we call this number the dividend. So go ahead and label your equation. Your first number is called dividend. It even looks like it has the word divide in it with just the ND on the end. So that's an easy way of remembering that number. So this is how many we're starting to share equally. This is what we're starting out with. So if I have 15 pencils, I'm about to share these 15 pencils equally. So I'm going to take these 15 pencils and I'm going to share them equally with 3 friends. So this number, the number of equal shares that I have, is called my divisor. So go ahead and write the word divisor. And then the last number, the answer to my division problem, is called the quotient. So those are going to be really important vocabulary words. We know the answer to a multiplication problem is called a product. The answer to a division problem is called the quotient. And you might see division equations written a little bit differently, which we'll talk about, but this is the main symbol that we're going to be using for division right now. All right, so now let's talk about how we can apply our strategies that we learned for multiplication And how could we use those same strategies to help us solve some division problems? So the first strategy we're going to look at is equal groups. So if you remember equal groups for multiplication, we knew that we took our first factor, 3, and that meant we drew 3 groups. We put our second factor, 5 x's in each group so that they were equal. So we're combining equal things. We have 3 equal groups of 5. And I know in order to find my answer, I would just do some quick skip counting or adding 5 plus 5 plus 5, 5, 10, 15. I know my product is 15. So now I'm taking that idea and I'm applying it to division. I'm going to call this strategy, instead of equal groups, I'm going to call it equal shares. So go ahead and write equal shares on your notebook. And the way that I'm going to use this strategy is very similar, but instead of starting with this number, I'm going to look at this number, because remember, I'm going to be sharing with 3 friends. So I'm going to draw 3 circles. And I want to think that I want 15 pencils, but I want everybody to have an equal share of my 15 pencils. So I'm going to play a little game. It's called you get one, 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 until I run out. And this number, this dividend, is the number that I'm going to be counting to. So it's really important that I keep this number in my brain and I count out loud so I don't lose track. So I'm going to play you get one until I count to 15. So it looks like this. 1, 2, 3. I don't have any more circles, so I have to start over. So I was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I know to stop because I know that I'm stopping on 15. So now that I've shared all of my 15 equally, how do I find my answer? How do I find my quotient? So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put a box around my first circle. And I'm going to count how many X's are in that one circle. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I know that if I take 15 pencils and I share them equally amongst 3 of my friends, each friend is going to get 5 pencils. So that just told me that my quotient for 15 divided by 3 is 5. Now I want you to make a connection. If we go back over here and we look at 3 times 5 equals 15, I kind of already had a clue that my answer might be 5 because this factor was 5 and I was missing that number in this equation. So if I look, I have 3, 5, and 15, and over here I have those same numbers. So we're seeing that connection between addition and subtraction, but with multiplication and division. All right, we're going to talk about one more strategy, but before we do, we're going to pause, and your teacher is going to give you a few division problems to try to solve using equal shares. So go ahead and do that now. All right, hopefully everyone was successful in using their equal shares to solve some division problems. Now we're going to learn one more strategy today. This is the strategy in multiplication. It's called repeated addition. So if you think about how we would use repeated addition, we would repeatedly add the number this many times, or we know with commutative property it doesn't really matter, we can switch them. So for me, I think I'm gonna skip count. I'm gonna add repeatedly 5s because that's an easier number for me to add. So I'm gonna add 5 plus 5 plus 5. Now, could I add 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3? Yes, I know it would get me the same answer. So 5 plus 5 plus 5 equals 15. So I'm still getting that same product. So what would this be called in division? So if this is repeated addition, in division, I'm going to use repeated. If I want to make my number smaller, I'm going to use repeated subtraction. So go ahead and write the name of your strategy. So the way repeated subtraction works is, again, I'm going to start with my dividend, my big number, so that's 15. And this time, I'm going to repeatedly, instead of repeatedly add, I'm going to repeatedly subtract. So I'm going to repeatedly subtract 5 until I get to 0. So if I take 15 minus 5, that would equal 10. I have to keep going till I get to 0, so I'm going to do it again. 10 minus 5 equals 5. Am I to 0 yet? Nope, so I have to keep going. 5 minus 5 equals 0. So I finally got to 0. So how do I figure out my answer? So I have to count how many times did I have to subtract by 5 until I got to 0. So I had to do it 1, 2, 3 times. So that tells me that 15 divided by 3 equals 5. So I'm getting that same quotient. Or another way we could look at that same equation is 15 divided by 5 equals 3. So just like in multiplication, the way that I can switch my factors, in division, I can switch my divisor and my quotient, and it's still the same. All right, so now you're going to practice a couple of division problems using repeated subtraction. And I will see you tomorrow, and we will learn 2 more division strategies.